I thought the topic about buffer zones, purpose versus perception, could follow on nicely from a discussion that was had or presented at the symposium last year on the zone of influence. And I'm not going to, go into the academics of a buffer zone. I think that is fairly straightforward. What I would like to discuss today is what is the buffer zone intended to do, what is actually happening, and how can we strengthen this tool. Obviously, I'm coming from a legal perspective, and there will be other discussions today about the non-legal or integrating the legal side into a more ecological management aspect of it. So this is just the sort of boring legal side, but also hopefully try and give some sense of a solution or some tool to use to strengthen this the buffer zone. This is just a little diagram, and I've put something on the table here. It's a cupcake with an air freshener over it. And what a buffer zone is intended to do is not actually, restrict every activity or development. Buffer zone is meant to just encapsulate the protected area and prevent those impacts that are severely negative for the protected area, and ensure that those are within a distance that could be absorbed by a sort of sponge buffer zone. So where this air freshener, which may or may not have run out of battery, I don't know, but the impact of the air freshener being one land use and the method representing the protected area is that the impact of, say, for an example, it's industrial noxious gas emission, or it's mining with coal dust sort of being redistributed over the protected area. The impact is not necessarily phrased as the management authority has to continually pay to rehabilitate, to monitor, to manage the impact of an activity that is not their fault or not their doing. Further, those activities outside are not required to minimize the impacts, which are going to be a lot more sensitively felt by the protected area. They're not required to pay for those costs. So you have a management authority that is constantly trying to clean the air freshener off the protected area, whereas what should happen never reach the protected area. So a buffer zone is not to stop development. It's almost to absorb impacts that are going to be significantly impacted on the reserve or the park. The buffer zone is not a primary conservation activity land use. So it's not, open space. It's not purely acting as a buffer zone. It is an ancillary part of keeping that area more. It could be some sort of development. It could be grazing. It could be agriculture. It could be a whole lot of things that basically cushion the impact. So if we look at the legal status of a buffer zone, and we've seen it you look on the PACA system, and you can see the beautiful 5-kilometer, 10-kilometer buffer zone. You also look in the EIA listing notice 3, it talks about the 5-kilometer, 10-kilometer buffer zone. But the Protected Areas Act doesn't say anything about a buffer zone. It doesn't give it any legal status. The EIA regulations really bring the threshold down for an activity that might be inconsistent with a reserve or a protected area. It doesn't prohibit, doesn't restrict, and it doesn't further regulate those impacts. So you have these ancillary legal tools. We also see it in the National Biodiversity Strategy for buffer zones. And the reason why I put that one last is, there's these, and this applies to national parks. And what it says is that the following activities are inconsistent, should not be permitted. And it's mining, it's industrial noxious gas emissions, and I think there's 3 or 4 others, but those are the primary ones. And then we look at what is actually happening. And I'm going to show you a few examples of recent development approvals in the buffer zone, which go directly against the strategy, this mentality that all of us have. It's a buffer zone. It's, it serves a purpose. So you'll see the first one is the Rhino oil and gas fracking. When I say fracking application over a large part of, totally within the Maloti Drakensberg Park, which is a World Heritage Site, and obviously a protected area as well. It's a nature reserve in addition to that. I'm not sure if you can see very clearly, but the middle picture, those orange lines indicate the outline of the exploration application right. And then you can see the buffer zone indicated in the KZN draft buffer zone policy on your right. And it's the sort of light brown to dark brown areas. Now that is where the whole fracking application is over. And it just demonstrates again, what is the legal status of a buffer zone? Because it's very, very good to have these policies. It's very good to have strategies. But where are developments being held up or being regulated or being refused on the basis of a buffer zone? We see the second example is the Rio recent mining application lodged on the boundary of Isimangaliso Wetland Park, another World Heritage Site. The Marlet mining application, which is in the buffer zone of the Kruger National Park. So even where you have a national park with a strategy, it's not being enforced. The Villiers mining rights, so I'm aware that this is sort of a few years ago, not as recent as the others, but it's a very good indication of where this visually, looking at the Mapum where I never ever get to say this correctly in a presentation, but at home I'm sure. That national park, and it is also a World Heritage Site, and these mining applications have been ongoing for quite a while. I'm not going to go through every single one because I think everyone's very familiar with it. The point is that these are not 10 years old. These are all in the last 2 or 3 years. And what I'd like to do today is almost take the discussion forward from the zone of influence presentation from last year and look at a possible solution or a way to make it more legally recognized. And that is to declare the buffer zone as a protected environment. Protected environment may be declared for a number of reasons. The first reason is in section 28.2a, and it says a declaration under subsection 1a, which is to declare a protected environment, may only be issued to regulate the area as a buffer zone, conservation and protection of a special nature reserve, national park, or a marine protected area, World Heritage Site, or nature reserve. That is a very specific tool that we can use. But a lot of the perception around a protected environment is that it's a whole declaration, it's consultation, it's consent of landowners, but it's actually it's made in the act to be a lot easier than a nature reserve declaration. All you need from a landowner is consent. And it doesn't have to be a written agreement. It's not an agreement between the NEC and the landowner. It's consent. The landowner could, not to be too risky, but email the NEC and say, I consent. That is all you need, is consent. So it's meant to be a very quick process. But to even make it a bit more streamlined, looking at when you're declaring a nature reserve or a national park or an expansion, you have to consult with those landowners who are going to be adjacent to the new protected area anyway. So that those landowners, by virtue of just having any type of biodiversity value and being approximate to the reserve, they will trigger certain listed activities anyway, which means that they will get the burden and none of the protection. So this is a way to almost sell it to the landowners that for the prospective buffer zone during consultation that, you're going to have, by virtue of just as they are, the CBA 1 or 2, a lot of the time being in the EIA buffer zone, this way you're actually giving them a little bit of a legal status as well. I understand that this is a bit, it just screams a lot of work, but it can be done in the process or in an expansion process or even in a management plan updating process where you are consulting with those landowners anyway. It gives them a very small amount of legal protection, but it's far more than anything that has been given without it. So if all of those cases that we've sort of set out had been declared protected environments, there would be an additional requirement for the Minister of Environmental Affairs and Minister of DMR to approve those mining rights first. So it's almost just making those areas look a little bit less desirable to mining companies. And I use mining as an example, but it could be any type of activity that is blatantly inconsistent with conservation or the purpose for which an area was declared. And that's my presentation.